One daughter is a doctor. My mother lifted her wineglass and smiled proudly at the 12 people crowded around our Thanksgiving table. She pointed toward my older sister, Melissa, and the other is a maid. Then she pointed at me. A few people laughed. I didn't. I was still standing beside the table with a serving dish in my hands. Melissa gave me a small, uncomfortable smile, but said nothing. Mom laughed harder. What? Vanessa knows I'm joking. She was always better with a mop than a textbook anyway. My father leaned toward me. Don't ruin Thanksgiving, he whispered. She's joking. I slowly placed the serving dish on the table. Because what none of those 12 people knew was that the repaired ceiling above their heads, the new refrigerator holding their Thanksgiving leftovers, and even part of the catering for the dinner they were eating had something in common. Me. I had paid for them. But Mom wasn't finished. And when she lifted her glass a second time to toast Melissa, I reached into my handbag, pulled out my phone, and placed it beside my plate. Actually, Mom. Her smile faltered. I think I'd like to say something first. The room shifted. Until that moment, I had done what I always did. Stayed quiet. At 31, I'd become very good at swallowing comments like that. Mom had spent years turning every conversation about Melissa and me into a comparison. Melissa had the title she understood. Doctor. I had the career she preferred not to explain. So when two relatives we hadn't seen in years asked about us that Thanksgiving, Mom saw another opportunity to tell the version of our family she liked best. Melissa smiled as congratulations moved around the table. That's incredible. Your parents must be so proud. Mom practically glowed. Then someone glanced at me. Before I could speak, Mom delivered her little punchline. The other is a maid. That was the part everyone heard. What they didn't know was how much Mom already knew about my work, or how carefully she'd made sure they didn't. I looked around the dining room. The ceiling had been repaired after water damage. I remembered that invoice. The stainless steel refrigerator in the kitchen. I remembered paying for that too. Even the catering deposit for this dinner had quietly passed through my hands. Dad knew. Mom knew. Neither of them seemed bothered by accepting my help. They only became embarrassed when they had to acknowledge where that help came from. Mom apparently took my silence as permission to continue. A few minutes later, she tapped her spoon against her glass. Before dessert, I want to make another toast to Melissa. I slid my phone onto the table. No. Mom stopped. Dad turned sharply toward me. I had never interrupted her like that in front of family. Mom lowered her glass slightly. Excuse me. I met her eyes. For years, I'd protected my parents from embarrassment, even while they used me as the family's punchline. That ended at that table. Because there was something about the house Mom was standing in that none of those 12 people knew. And she knew I had the proof sitting right beside my plate. What did I know about that house that could make my mother suddenly afraid for me to speak? Earlier that afternoon, before anyone had arrived, I'd walked through my parents' front door carrying dessert. Put that in the kitchen, Mom called. I passed the living room and stopped. Mom was arranging family photographs across the mantel. Melissa's medical school graduation picture sat directly in the center. But something was missing. Where's the picture from my office opening? Mom didn't look at me. I moved a few things. Where? Vanessa, people are coming, don't start. That photograph had sat on the mantel for months. It showed me standing beneath the sign for Vantage Home and Estate Services on the day we opened our first proper office. Now it was nowhere in sight. I carried the dessert into the kitchen. Mom followed me. Actually, there's something I wanted to mention. I closed the refrigerator. What? Your aunt and uncle haven't seen you in years. They'll probably ask what you're doing now. I'll tell them my own Vantage. Her expression changed immediately. You don't need to make a whole speech about it. A speech. You know what I mean. Sometimes you explain the business, and it sounds like you're trying too hard. I stared at her. So what exactly should I tell them? She lowered her voice. Just say you work in cleaning. There it was. I folded my arms. Melissa gets to say she's a doctor, but I'm supposed to hide what I actually do. Being a doctor commands respect, Vanessa. And owning a company doesn't. Mom sighed. A cleaning business isn't something people need a presentation about. Before I could answer, something on the counter caught my eye. An envelope beneath a pile of mail. Overdue property tax notice. Mom saw me looking. She immediately pulled another envelope over it. That's being handled. I almost laughed. I knew exactly how it was being handled. Dad entered before I could answer. What's going on? Nothing, Mom said quickly. I looked at him. Mom wants me to tell everyone I just clean houses. Dad rubbed his forehead. Vanessa, please. Thanksgiving is important to your mother. So keep things pleasant. I looked between them. They weren't asking Melissa to minimize herself. They were asking me. Again. Fine, I said. I'm not starting an argument. Mom visibly relaxed. She thought she'd won. Then, while I was helping set the table before dinner, my phone vibrated. A notification from Vantage's accounting system appeared on the screen. Another payment connected to my parents' property had cleared. I stared at it for several seconds. Mom wanted my money attached to this house. She just didn't want my success attached to my name. From the dining room, I heard her laughing with the first guests as they arrived. I opened the payment record. For once, I didn't close it and pretend nothing was wrong. I took a screenshot. Then I saved it to my phone before walking into the dining room. After Mom called me, the maid, Uncle David was the first person who tried to rescue the conversation. He cleared his throat and looked at me. So, Vanessa, where are you working these days? I opened my mouth. Mom answered first. She cleans expensive houses. She's very good at it. That time, nobody laughed. I set down my fork. I don't work for the company. Mom glanced at me. I own it. The conversation around the table stopped. Mom's smile tightened. I continued before she could interrupt. Vantage Home and Estate Services, it's mine. My aunt blinked. You own the entire company. Yes. How many people work for you? 46. Now Melissa was looking at me differently. I kept my voice calm. We have residential cleaning teams, estate management services, and household staffing. We also manage corporate residences and high-value properties. My cousin suddenly leaned forward. Wait, Vantage. I nodded. My employer uses Vantage for the executives' residences. Mom immediately waved her hand. It's still cleaning, Vanessa. There it was again. Not confusion. Not ignorance. A deliberate attempt to make what I'd built sound small. I looked at her. I never said cleaning was something to be ashamed of. Melissa shifted in her chair. Mom's not saying it's shameful. She's just saying medicine and your business are different levels of achievement. I turned toward her. Until that moment, I hadn't blamed Melissa for what Mom was doing. She hadn't made the first joke. She hadn't removed my photograph. But now she'd chosen to join in. Different levels, I asked. Melissa looked away. You know what I mean. Yes, I said. I think I finally do. Dad cut in quickly. Can we just eat? For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mom apparently decided the best way to regain control was to pretend the conversation had never happened. She lifted her wineglass again. Anyway, I watched her stand. To Melissa, she announced, smiling around the table, who showed us what real professional success looks like. That was it. I reached for the phone beside my plate. Mom. Her glass remained raised. What now, Vanessa? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Before you finish that toast, should I tell everyone who paid to keep this house from going into default? Dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. My aunt stared at Mom. Melissa's smile disappeared. And for the first time that evening, Mom had nothing prepared. Her wineglass slowly lowered. Vanessa. What? I asked. We're talking about professional success. Let's talk about it. Dad whispered my name like a warning. But I kept my eyes on Mom. Her face had gone rigid. Then she leaned slightly toward me and said the one sentence that told everyone at that table my question wasn't a bluff. You promised you would never bring that up. Nobody touched their food. Mom looked around the table and seemed to realize what she'd just admitted. She immediately tried to recover. It's not what Vanessa is making it sound like, she said. There was a small family loan, that's all. I unlocked my phone. Small. Dad's chair scraped against the floor. Vanessa put the phone away. No. He stared at me. I had never answered him that quickly before. Mom's eyes dropped to my screen. She knew exactly what I had saved. 18 months ago, I said, Dad's consulting income dropped. The mortgage fell behind. Then the property taxes became a problem. My aunt slowly turned toward my parents. Dad looked down. I continued. They came to me privately and asked for help. Mom interrupted. Families help each other. I agreed. I looked directly at her. But I asked for one thing in return. Stop treating my career like an embarrassment. Mom's mouth tightened. You're being dramatic. I opened the payment ledger. Am I? I turned the screen toward Uncle David. There wasn't one payment. There were rows of them. Mortgage assistance. Property tax. Emergency plumbing. Roof repair. Household expenses. Melissa leaned across the table. Wait. She looked at Mom. You told me Dad was doing fine. Mom didn't answer. Melissa looked toward him. Dad. He still wouldn't meet her eyes. For 18 months, Mom had continued telling relatives that Dad's consulting work was successful, while presenting Melissa as the daughter who had made something of herself. Meanwhile, money from the business she dismissed as just cleaning had been helping keep their house running. Mom's voice hardened. You offered to help us, Vanessa. Nobody forced you. You don't get to weaponize generosity because your feelings are hurt. I locked eyes with her. Helping you was generosity. I tapped the phone. Taking the help while lying about me was a choice. The room went still again. Mom opened her mouth, but Uncle David was already studying the payment list. His expression changed as he scrolled. I reached for the phone, ready to give them the number Mom had spent 18 months hiding. But before I could say it, Uncle David looked across the table at her. Diane. Mom froze. He turned the screen slightly toward her. Exactly how much money has Vanessa paid for this house? I didn't answer Uncle David immediately. I looked at Mom. For once, I gave her the opportunity she'd denied me all evening. Do you want to tell them? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Dad stared at his plate. So I turned my phone around. $38,400. Silence. Not the uncomfortable silence after one of Mom's jokes. Complete silence. 12 people sat around that Thanksgiving table, and nobody moved. Over 18 months, I continued. Overdue mortgage payments, property taxes, emergency plumbing, the roof repair, other essential household expenses. Mom's wineglass was still in her hand, but the toast was forgotten. I looked around the table. And since we're discussing what I do for a living, that money came from the business Mom keeps calling just cleaning. Nobody interrupted me now. I own Vantage Home and Estate Services. 46 people work there. We clean homes, manage estates, provide household staff, and service corporate residences across the region. Then I looked directly at Mom. And yes, I started by cleaning houses myself. Her eyes dropped. I've never been ashamed of that, not once. Honest work isn't humiliating. I pointed toward the table. But accepting money generated by that work and then using it as an insult in front of your family, that's humiliating. Melissa slowly removed the napkin from her lap. You told me the mortgage was fine. Mom finally found her voice. This is private family business. I almost smiled. They were private finances while you respected me. You made my life public when you used it as a joke. My aunt, the same aunt who had laughed when Mom called me a maid, looked at me. Vanessa, I'm sorry. Then she turned toward Mom. Diane, you let us laugh at her while she's been paying thousands toward this house. Another relative shook his head. Calling your daughter the maid while accepting $38,000 from her is cruel. Mom placed her glass on the table. You've embarrassed us enough. No, I said. I'm done preventing you from being embarrassed by your own choices. Dad finally looked up. What does that mean? It means this month is the last month. Mom's face changed. What? The payment that's already been made stays. I'm not asking either of you to repay the money I've already given you. Dad exhaled. But after that, I'm done. No more mortgage rescue, no more taxes, no repairs, no household expenses. Mom pushed her chair back. You can't suddenly do that.